we kind of set a mantra for ourselves where we almost want a player or anyone to recognize our game immediately. If you were to take a screenshot, like within a split second, we want the player to be like, oh, that's the final.
When we make a map, we start out with picking some goals that we want to achieve with the map. That can be, fitting a specific hole in our roster or some kind of experience that we haven't really covered yet in our game, and a location that we want to cover.
Getting into grips with with the destruction system, that is also very memorable to begin with. Using all the really cool toys that the finals has, that felt really, really good.
So playtest tomorrow. That's going to be very nice just to evaluate it.
Yep. About the anti-gravity volumetric tower around it, the dynamism team has been doing some testing and optimization. At first they're a bit like, ooh, we're not sure we can get this performant enough, but after some more tweaks from Tim, it seems to be heading in the right direction.
So when building maps for the finals, there's a few elements that we try to strive for when it comes to the visual part of it. So one part is inviting, another one is distinct, and then we have appealing. So inviting means that we're trying to make the map a place that you want to go to. You feel almost like home, maybe not like home, but you just want to be there and explore it. It could be something that the players have seen before, like an actual place that they have maybe potentially visited before, or maybe a place that they want to go that they haven't visited. So a few examples like Monaco, Bernal, Kyoto.
What we look for in a good location for a map is variation, which is very important to us. So we want to have at least a few distinct sub-themes that helps with navigation. It also allows us to create different dynamics that allows different play styles to shine, which is very exciting because players play our maps for hundreds, if not thousands of hours. So we want to make sure that everyone is having a good time. We're looking for verticality, like when it comes to destruction, anything that can come down, it's probably better if we put objectives high up. I remember Gustav, they showed us, I think it was a clip from Transformers, where there was basically an entire building going, he's like, this is what I want. And we were like, okay, let's see how we can make that happen.
Working with destruction, physics can be very unpredictable, and some really weird behavior can happen that is sometimes also catches us completely by surprise. I think that's one of the most challenging aspects of working with the destruction system. With physics, there's always something weird happening, and we need to catch those.
There's one clip online of this guy who's just like in a building as it's just tumbling, and it's just like, that's physics. It's real life. It's like it's happening. Like
that's dynamism.
Hey Gustav, I think we've done it.
Yeah.
The most amount of fun that we see from destruction is not necessarily getting to the end state as fast as possible. It's kind of sitting between the starting state and the end state, and kind of living in that. That's where you have to adapt a lot. That's where you have to kind of work with all the changing environment around you, right?
That's the best part, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we want to be. We don't necessarily want to be at the flat pile of rubble at the end of it.
No.
And it's about kind of that journey for the entirety. Like if we have an objective space, it's really cool to see that kind of change over the minute and a half that the objective is active. You don't want the objective to immediately end up on the bottom floor. It's almost like slowing down destruction in a certain way to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
So
our internal playtests are often quite sweaty.
Yeah.
So there's always a lot of destruction happening.
It's like, can we make the server crawl?
But that's a good point, actually. The ranked play, there's very little destruction compared to the lower levels, let's say. Yeah, like destruction can also be a very big disadvantage for your own team, right?
Absolutely.
You can put yourself in a very bad position if you want, if you're unlucky. So yeah.
So in order to capture the aesthetic of a place, we always try to go for on reference trips to the location that we want to build. With a small team, a mix of lighting artists, level designers, and environment artists, to just trying to capture as much as possible. And with that, I mean capturing both the assets themselves or our architecture, scale, but also just how things are related to each other. Like how do spaces actually connect? Because those are the trickiest part to figure out by yourself. If this is a stair here, what happens after you go up that stair? And what does that lead into? Things in isolation, of course, can be sometimes easy to find references for, but just the whole picture of a place is the hardest part. We have also used drone scanning to actually scan objects. And an example of that was the mountain in Bernal. So since it would be quite hard to take a lot of pictures from the distance, we used a drone and we flew it up. And then as we were driving the drone on the other side of the mountain, we lost connection with the drone itself, which meant that we were panicking a little bit there, just like, have we actually had it as it crashed? But then eventually we managed to get connection again, and then it came back to us. And then in the map itself, we managed to use that to create the assets in the game. The goal as well is not to necessarily copying the real location one-to-one. It's about capturing the feeling of the place. And the feeling, that's things that you can't necessarily touch. And that's why it's important for us to go there and get that feeling. Like, how does it sound like? How does it smell like? How does it look like? All of those aspects are super important for us to really capture that feeling. So not trying to copy everything one-to-one, but just more the feeling of the place.
When we approach a new map, we usually present it with an initial brief from the directors. And if we look, for example, at Fangwai City, the brief was that we wanted this clash of ultra-modern, almost futuristic Asian city together with very traditional Chinese architecture. That presented us with a unique challenge. Find a way to have these two different spaces exist next to each other without feeling like it's a patchwork of different ideas. We had to look a lot at, the transition spaces, the infrastructure in between them to make you feel like this is actually a space that would work. For me, one of the most challenging but also fun things when working on the finals is that every season you don't really know what you're going to get. So one time it can be ultra-modern versus traditional China. Then the season before we had, some abstract, glitchy Japanese stuff. Then we had medieval ones. For each season you have to approach it with a completely new mindset and find out a completely new art style, new architecture, new palettes, new vibes, and try to still make everything feel like it belongs into the finals.
Yeah, just to sell the game show feel, I guess, yes. Overall. It's really interesting because since we have completely different settings, we also have to rethink how to light scenes.
Yes.
Let's say ancient Japan, like Kyoto, we don't have electricity, so we are completely reliant on small dim candle lights and lanterns. Which is completely different from something like, let's say, Nozomi Citadel, where we could use some glitched environments just as a light fixture itself.
True,
or light source itself. Lighting plays a really large role when it comes to a look or mood in the level. So we want to try to get something in as quickly as possible. And it's also a great responsibility because bad lighting can make everything look pretty bad.
We always have lighting in the back of our mind when we work on concepts, especially in the initial phase, because it's such an important tool to set the vibe right. The most apparent example for that is the Nozomi Citadel map, where we even have two extremely different lighting scenarios within a single map. So you have the CNS style, which is very stylized and abstract almost. It has very flat colors, very saturated shadows, which gives us this very dreamy feeling. And then on the other side, you have Vaya, which just look harsh and corporate and high contrast, bluish cold light. And that alone just emphasizes the contrast between them so much.
That's funny. Also with Nozomi Citadel, when I was in Japan during that time, Stigson asked me about some specific assets, if I could scan them over there.
Yeah, and you were sending so many street decovers and signage so we can make it realistic.
Yeah, the process from a scan until having something in the game was less than 24 hours or something.
I remember, that was crazy. Just have some traffic light in and oh, now it's in the engine. Yeah. We, as concept artists, work a lot with the level design team. Usually it's the most fun spaces to play are not often the most realistic ones. So we collaborate quite closely to try to find a balance to make a fun gameplay possible, but also still grounded in reality, because if you enter a building, ideally you should understand in what kind of space you are.
Yeah, and sometimes when we've either playtested something a lot or when the community's given a lot of feedback, we have to make changes to our maps. And the way that we kind of approach that is we have a lot of data that we gather. We have really interesting tools like heat maps that we can check out, player movement, objective movement, all that kind of stuff. It's very exciting for me as a level designer to look at heat maps, because heat maps are kind of an accumulation of thousands of players doing a bunch of stuff, and you start seeing patterns. One of the best examples of something that didn't quite work out in the past was the Seoul hospital roof. It is one of my favorite iterations in the game that we've done so far, where that entire building was designed around this fantasy of crossing this super dangerous rooftop. And so we didn't quite want to take out the entire rooftop and kind of smash stuff together. We wanted to keep that idea that we had, that concept, that gameplay experience, but we wanted to remove some of the frustration points, particularly when players have very good aim. That's when things got very dodgy for the folks trying to approach them.
The challenging thing about Season 11 is that the map takes place in a gigantic ring in space. So it's not very comparable to lighting we did before. So we would have the space outside of an habitable zone, which creates this very unique vibe to this map that we didn't have before. So there were a few things we had to approach differently, while also maintaining the vision of the map that this should be some very utopian and very inviting place, but also feel sci-fi, but don't feel too cold and technical. So yeah, that was a fun thing to figure out.
Exactly, this was a bit tricky to get this right, because in our first iteration, it kind of looked like Earth, to be honest. So I got many complaints. They're like, this doesn't look like a space station. Right. we solved it with the stone shape, and that the atmosphere thins out to the top pretty fast, so that we can still see a little bit of the space and stars.
The maps team on the finals and the environment artist, we're only a few people, and we like to try to keep it as small as possible, because that allows us full control, and that allows us to really push for the tools and the workflows that we have in-house. So we don't outsource anything, so we try to build everything in-house in order to really push the boundaries of what workflows and tooling can do. For us, it's been very important, and that's also something that is important for Embark as well, in order to really stand out as a company that can push the boundaries for the visual quality. So an artist on the finals also needs to work with a lot of other departments, because our game is so connected. A lot of features are connected. We have dynamis, destruction, the different game modes that we have, gadgets, and we need to make sure that everything that we build works for all of those different aspects. So for us, that's quite challenging as well. It's not just suited for one specific thing. It's also different lighting conditions that we have. We need to make sure that all the things looks good, not in just daytime, nighttime. So working with the other department and being close together and collaborating on those, we can make sure that we have a really good looking game in the end.